It is Shirley with Spirit of Matter. And we are on a Venus day with Venus retrograde on the ascendant, being the most angular planet that we have additional planets, and Saturn hour. The ascendant is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is retrograde in Pisces in the second house for this chart. The midheaven is in Scorpio, 26 degrees, with Mars in the 8th house, Mercury retrograde in Virgo in the 8th house, and the moon in Sagittarius, middle phase, 17 degrees. Moon separating from a trine to Venus and applying to a trine to Chiron retrograde in Aries, which is Mars sign. And so, although this would probably not be the best election for a discussion, I kind of thought, hey, I'm not going to wait the 4 minutes to Jupiter. Let's talk about this. So Mercury retrograde in Virgo. If you're not listening for the astrology, just wait in a couple of minutes and I'll go to the topic of the episode. I usually like to give an astrological framework because this is what I do. So Mercury retrograde, Mercury rules trade, rules children, rules trade in children, rules in Virgo. Virgo rules healing, the intestine health. The tiny little details is a very detailed sign. The frequencies, herbs as healing herbs, and chemistry. So the axis of Virgo, Pisces also ruling pharmaceutics as well in pharmaceutical industries, and I absolutely saw things relevant to that. Mars is another wealth master. It's about passion and drive, but it's also about real estate, about business and the business drive. Mars is ruling both Scorpio, that is the psychological savviness that we need to make business, as well as Aquarius, which is the self-assertion, innovation, and sense of entrepreneurship. In Aries, we say, I am. We don't ask anybody for permission to exist, nor do we wait to be saved as we would perhaps in Pisces. So this is the framework from which I'm talking about this. And what prompted this conversation, if I can show you, I don't know. So if I go here, it will show me, right? Or would it show the video? No, it shows the video that I'm watching. So this is in a channel by Sarah Dangler. And the point here is not Jordan Peterson. The point is the lady that he's speaking with, which is a business savvy African woman. And she's talking about entrepreneurship and business culture and legislation that allows for growing free markets in Africa, in the entire continent. And I have been also watching entrepreneurship that's happening in Ghana. There's a lot of entrepreneurship in Ghana. There's actually, if you like rum for your tinctures that you're making, so there is a company called Rain, which is Rain as in to rule, okay? REIGN, not rain like raindrops. And this is a lady that bought land. She came from back to Ghana and she bought land and basically made of it a rum factory, which is very, very lovely, very high quality rum. And the symbol is the symbol from the tribe that she comes from. And her idea is to give every employee the sense that they are royal, that they are ruling, because agriculture doesn't seem like a sexy thing to do, but she tries to give people kind of like the respect as agriculture people, and to grow something, to provide jobs, and grow a brand that is quite interesting. So if you're making tinctures and you want some high quality rum, and try to do something other than whiskey or vodka, then perhaps you want to try and purchase from this company that is made in Ghana by people of Ghana and hopefully treated with respect, as they say. And so what I was concerned about was the models that were being, if I go back to this video, I don't have the rights. I do this publicity, so I don't have the rights to use like segments of it. But basically what she mentions is the models that she is referring to as in a thriving, prospering free market are Dubai, China, and Singapore. Okay, they mentioned Ghana a little bit, and Ghana is thriving with entrepreneurship, but my Israeli mind that questions everything and is coming from a country that is considered startup nation, and is not unfamiliar with the business of agriculture, especially in the Negev where I live, a bit down south. Immediately, red flags were coming. So, first of all, a bit about me. I'm half Israeli, half Dutch. I grew up in Israel, and one of the things that are very Israeli culture is traveling. For me, it was in a different way. I was traveling mainly with Europe, mainly with my family, and wondering about housing, where will we live, because of my heritage, whatever. And but in general, in Israeli culture, it's very much accepted that after or before army service, or before studies and after studies, you are almost expected to travel the world, to get to know other places. Staying in your lane is not Israeli culture. Okay? We do not have, the lane of Israel is not to stay in your lane, but to learn from other people. How do they do things, and to have experiences, and so on and so forth. And so I guess perhaps because of that, it's a lot easier and a lot more accessible to understand also the dark side of things. So for example, when you're traveling, you will not only see, oh look, the Indians are living so great, so wonderfully, and they have this worldview, they believe in karma, and even if they are poor, they think this is my karma, and so on and so forth. Some Israelis will accept that, but an Israeli will ask questions, they will pick and probe, and that can trigger a lot of people, because we don't just accept culture as it is, okay? We ask questions, we want to know why is it the way it is, we challenge the status quo. It's something that for a lot of, where I come from is a thing, even within our own culture. It is not true to all Israelis, because Israelis vary. So this is a bit of a disclaimer, and this is how I got the access to certain knowledge, that when you are just looking through academia and through conferences and through some, maybe even traveling in the place, you might not be exposed to, especially if you're a well-behaved person that doesn't ask and doesn't probe and doesn't try to get to the bottom of things. So let's begin with the examples for a thriving free market, and what is the problem with them. In any order of importance, because anything, I'll be Singapore, okay? The issue with Singapore, and a lot of people travel to Singapore, and I sure would like to travel as well, and surely there are great things in Singapore. And the report of people who travel to both Singapore or Dubai is that I can leave my laptop, I can leave my things, there are cameras all over, nobody is going to steal anything. But what they don't know is the underlying story, and this is a story where nobody steals from you, not because people are being taken care of, but because they are being so limited from access to wealth, and there are so many cameras that you just don't encounter the actual problems in Singapore. Okay? You just don't encounter the people who don't have the wealth. So you can say, I can leave my laptop, it is safe, it is this. Okay, it is nice, it is a wonderful feeling that you don't have to worry about stealing, as you wouldn't be having to worry in Amsterdam, for example, other cities in the world, even in developed countries. But it is not so good that you don't know what's going underneath. You don't know what people are oppressed. You don't know if there's slavery. You don't know all these things. All you know is that there are many cameras, and they're spying you even, and you just get this, nobody steals from me. That is not necessarily, if you talk about a place like Africa, or a place where it's a growing economy, and you say, would I like for Africa to be Singapore, and would that bring that freedom and liberty that we desire when we talk about free markets? We usually talk about being free. Okay, it's the desire to be free, it's the desire to travel, to do, to not look at the money when I buy food, or buy anything for my family, to not be concerned about where my next meal is coming from, or being in poverty. Okay, and so that is not necessarily the policies that govern this economy, is not necessarily what's going to get us the freedom that we seek, let alone the financial freedom. Yeah. Another example is Dubai. And Dubai is amazing, it's stunning. I know that some of my family wanted us to go to Dubai even before it was possible for Israelis to travel there. I haven't been there in person. Of course, I would like to see Dubai. That being said, when we talk about the great buildings, the wonderful, whether it's architecture or real estate that we see in Dubai, and their great openness to expats, to people from all over, to business, those things are lovely. But the thing is, the people who build those buildings, they're basically have no rights. Some of them either immigrated or were smuggled. Okay, and when a person is like this, maybe they come from a place where they escaped for their life, and they're being told, you will be able to work, you will be able, and then their passports are being taken away from them. They work and sleep for, like, I don't know how many people in one room, and they work as slaves until probably they die, and the money doesn't even get to their families. And even if they want to say, okay, I don't want this, it's very difficult for them to pay to get the passport back. So basically they are enslaved, and they're held hostage. Again, if I'm talking about a place like, whichever place in Africa that people would desire to further develop, because Africa is already developed. Okay, Africa is not this undeveloped whole world. There are places and there are places, and I invite you to watch a channel like Ekazi Joy, I think, Akech, like Angela Summer Namubiru, to get kind of a bit more about the Africa that we don't see. You will have to withstand the sarcasm. They're very sarcastic. It's a cultural thing, I guess, because I've seen it with several people from several countries in Africa. But you're going to have a sarcasm tolerance. But it's basically, you get to see a lot of the Africa that we don't see. So it's not that Africa is an underdeveloped continent. That being said, as we look at growing markets and developing markets, which is still a part of any place, to be accurate, and we do tackle also the places that are poor or in poverty, we think about what is the model that we would like. I don't think that Dubai is the model that the common person who lives in the big continent of Africa would like to be as a role model, where they are basically enslaved, and somebody comes, business person comes, and they build a huge building, and it's, as a third generation to the Holocaust, I see these buildings in Dubai, and immediately what I think, the graves of many people we call it kever achim, where they are basically the bones of many people that died living this and working in working camps, not like in working camps, immediately I think about this. It's like, yes, the building is beautiful, but how many people died building it? How many people were enslaved building it? And is that really what we want for Africa? Is that what we want for wherever you're listening to this from? Is this really the model that we want to go after as we are pursuing liberty and freedom that we all desire? And so the next example is China, of course. And yes, China is absolutely, first of all, China has made tremendous changes to its own structure, governmental structure, after the cultural revolutions of Mao. Basically, the entire structure of the government has changed so that no single person can take over the way that it was possible during Mao. So they made a lot of changes. That being said, the situation for women in China is still not right, okay? They're still not being treated the way that they should be treated. Um, that being said, there are places where they are not only around China. I'm saying China because right now it happens in China. It could have been United States, and for sure things like this happen. It's just that people tend to produce in China. And so China has to deal with worldwide market pressure, and its entire economy is based on that. And so basically what happens in a lot of places, there are children that are working in such conditions where they put nets over the windows, okay? And as an Israeli, I know this because we have people who work in startup, and a lot of these children produce. Even the phone that I'm speaking about is to raise awareness. Who knows, what children made it, and in what conditions. And a lot of Israelis work in high tech, that work in startups, that are going to see someplace, or going to see the fact that they've seen it, okay? They've seen it. So basically they're working like a working camp, and there are nets on the windows so that they cannot jump into their debts, okay? And so now that's, and this is not to vilify any country that it happens in. It's to understand that we have a structural problem. We talk about global markets where the economic pressures to sustain are so tremendous, and the results are these results. So I'm saying this not to vilify what exists, okay? Obviously, China wants to support its people, okay? It wants to thrive and survive as a very big continent, and if people would invade China, of course there would be death tolls. It's not that they are underdeveloped or not thinking great or not this or not that. There are people just as much as anybody. And another example in this problem is the Negev in Israel. The Negev is in Israel, the agriculture in the Negev is considered like a miracle because it was a desert. And from desert and dunes of sand, basically Israel built thriving economy of agriculture and export of fruits, of vegetables that are based in the Galil and in the Negev. The thing is, as the years went by, and I know this because I've been doing door-to-door with my parents selling their book in those villages that the farmers live, so we talk to the farmers. And we've seen, and we kind of ask, why don't they hire local employees? Like, this is jobs for people. And they told us, listen, in order to stand in the pressure, and these are families, when you say a farmer in Israel, you talk about a person who wakes up at 4:30 in the morning, 5 in the morning, works. By the time it's 10 or 11, the sun rises, you can hardly work, okay? It's a desert. Okay, so these are working people. These are not, just satellite bosses or satellite CEOs. These are people who live on the land and work on the land. They tell us something very simple. When I have to export, I have to have certain conditions that I stand in. With Israeli employees paying Israeli shekels, and standing even in the minimum wage that you're required to pay for an employee, I would no longer be able to exist as a farm. Okay, so it's not that you have people that are desiring to oppress or to enslave people. You have people that began as a thriving business, and there were Israelis coming, and there were volunteers from Europe coming to, and not only from all over the world, coming to pick up the fruits. Okay. But when we talk about the sustaining economy in a global market, there are some requirements that you're just required to, with whether it's having the quality of the fruit, or and the pricing of the fruit, and the speed of delivery, and the yield that you're supposed to have each year. This is life. You're growing life, okay? And then we made an industry history out of this, so you can understand the problems and the issues. And so it's people that come from Thailand, from the Philippines, that have this ability to work very quickly, and for them the money that they're being paid here is helpful to their families. But if the pressure of the markets become too big, they're going to be enslaved as well. And this is not because the farmers are this oppressive, privileged white people or whatnot. It's because we have a general problem in the structure of economy that we need to address worldwide. And this is why I'm saying even places like China, or thriving and emerging markets like only a 70-something-year-old country that is supposedly a thriving economy. I dare you not to even try to be homeless one day in Israel, but it's considered a thriving economy by GDP, by whatnot. And even here, is this the model? Is this the model that we want for Africa? It's very problematic to say yeah. It's very problematic to say yeah. So this is something that we must look at as we look at models for thriving economy, because underneath the word thriving economy, what the desire is to have people in better situation. When people are enslaved, losing their passport, children wanting to jump into their debt but can't, this is very, very oppressive, and so much so that, hey, if we can find better models, if we can stop looking at Israel, China, perhaps even Ukraine before the war, because as Ukraine was producing for China the electricity for the electricity like batteries for the EV cars, and in Singapore and Dubai, then we understand that it takes something more than legislation that allows for global economy to step into the land. Okay, in fact, one of the and there is also the question of political freedom, which we know in our country that we dealt with, and even when you have people coming from, I was really moved to hear the word diaspora when I watched documentaries about businesses in Ghana. So they address it as people coming from the diaspora. In Israel, we do address it as well. When a person comes from abroad and they're Israeli, then we look at it like they're coming from diaspora. And this is moving, yet I even heard a show about a businessman in Ghana that he was a lawyer, he came from America, and he came back to Ghana. It was very exciting because he did not know that he lived to the place that he came back to. Okay, he did not, only after he made the project, it was a big resort, he learned that he used to live there. And I believe him. Those things happen, the connection to the root chakra, to our motherland, to our ancestors. Sometimes we don't even know what is on, but life will yield the results that they need to yield, and we will go to the diaspora when we need to, and we will go to the motherland when we need to, and we will not even know about this. So I totally believe him, and I totally believe the purity of his heart and intentions. The thing is, as he was doing this project of building this resort, he was buying land from people. And even though he was paying to buy land, he was building up a business that where he treated employees like family, and so on and so forth, and providing jobs and all the free market, thingies. Even so, it took 2 years, and there were still families saying, we had land here, and he said, they don't have documents, they don't have anything, they don't develop the land, which is very capitalistic notion that does not necessarily have like, it's not a good or bad thing. Okay, we definitely want to develop the land in a way that is nourishing for the land, and is a way that is nourishing for the communities living there. It was not coming to do bad things. That being said, do we really want the people being deprived of their land and not having the chance to live on their land, to grow crops on their land, and for those business entrepreneurs or people coming from diaspora to come in a way that shares dividends with the people who live there, not only if they are employed within the conditions that the human resource management wants, even though it's all Ghana, it's all the people and the local people. Like, it, again, we also need to honor what he did, and also to look at it and say, we want to be free, we want to be connected with the land, we want to have our own crops and our own houses, as well as to have community lives. We don't want to sacrifice this, so we can say there's a big resort. And maybe in the beginning, for as long as this man, this lawyer and his wife are living, it's going to be great for people. And maybe you can just think about, how to compensate the people, and not just with one-time payment, but that they will be able to come to the resort, and to enjoy that, and to live in the place for as long as they're living, and as long as their children and children's children, so that will remain intergenerational wealth for them. So not to deprive people of their land in the name of doing something for Ghana. But what happens when the children and the children of this couple, of this lawyer, what happens when they say, okay, we want to be like free market, we want to open this to other places. We need to withstand the pressure, the worldwide pressure on tourism. In order to exist and to sustain a business, we really need to adjust. And this adjusting entails oppression, enslavement, child trafficking, and so on and so forth. So the topic of this video was, again, is, they say Jordan Peterson for the clickbait. It's mainly here the woman wearing yellow speaking, is, and I invite you to go to the original video. So I'm not going to try and like broadcast this without, because it's not a point. But this reaction video is basically the claim is like, no, we are not poor because of colonization. And I absolutely admire the diligence of taking a look at where is our point of interference, where is what we can do, where is the entrepreneurship that we can do, where we can, get educated and see what is good to implement. And my contribution is to make sure that we definitely look at other models that exist. So there are equity-based models for businesses. And one of them, I think it was actually a pizza place in the United States that were existing in a way where the dividends are shared among the employees. So definitely when you are founding a business, you want to have your vision and so on and so forth. So I'm not looking like a cooperative. This is also a very valid form of existence, but some of us were more creative, and we do want creative rights. And we do want to have this vision that the things orchestrate around, and with people who are on par with this vision. And so you can still do that, and you can still raise a business and give the dividends to the employees, such that they're not being paid for like $20, but it can actually get all the way up, depending on how successful the business is, to even $70 per hour. Okay? And even though they're supposedly working, with a pizza. And I think this is something that I definitely like to try, for example, in Italy, where there are €1 houses, and it's very difficult to get the economy to thrive. So I'm looking at Italy with the €1 houses is something that we could definitely try to think about doing. I'm also looking at the permaculture and its biodiversity and the growing crops around the moon, and the more like celebration of life. And again, this is Africa, okay? There are communities in villages that there are like if you are anywhere close to African or African descent, you probably know way more than me. In fact, I would love for you to have a reaction video or to write me in the comments or to educate me, because I'm only educated by bits and pieces of these things, but there's so many communities and tribes that I don't even know. And you only hear about from this researcher that went here and that researcher that went there. And every researcher has their own. If you're a white man coming to a black tribe in Africa, you're probably not going to hear about the ladies that I see on YouTube that teaches you that with garlic you can fight against psychic attack and spiritual rape, which is something that the West does not even know about. So you would say, oh, well, in Africa, they don't treat people who have mental ailment that well either. They do all kinds of rites that actually are harming to the body, because that is what you as a black man was, as a white person, white researcher was exposed to, which I'm sure you know because you've studied in all the right places and you already know the biases of your research. And I, without even being in Africa, can watch an African woman teaching me about how to use garlic spiritually and addressing issues that in the West were like, oh my gosh, we call that psychosis, and people give beta blockers. It's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So this is how bloodline heals a bloodline, when we meet, when we gather, when we learn from each other. And oftentimes we may find out that our ancestors are more related than we have perceived. So we can absolutely, I think that if we talk about a place, or in this case, I watched a video about Africa, so I'm giving the Africa example. I'm not there. So I'm sure that people live in communities and live even in villages, and I'm sure that there's a lot going for what people call economy that is already existing, and then how do we grow on that? And so I must say that, at least from my vantage point as a person who's living in a relatively privileged place that got out of the British mandate 70-something years ago, and is considered to have a thriving economy, and still, I told you, like, yes, there's a thriving economy, but we have to hire people that are not local to do agriculture and stuff like that, because we can't really pay them in shekels, and they can't sustain, like, even physically, they can't sustain this work. So that probably, if a person of your own land cannot sustain this work, and Israelis are fit, then you have a problem with the working condition. And I'm saying this absolutely with only appreciation for the farmers and the growers. And in this situation, the way I see it, I think, yes, colonialism absolutely is an issue. We absolutely do want to have opening to global markets. Again, from even a permaculture, or if I grow a doggy, let's say I want a golden retriever, okay? I want this golden retriever to at least be mixed with some other type of dog, so that it will live and survive and sustain, okay? There's basically, you could call it racism, but done right, because you actually need biodiversity to sustain the immune system of this dog, of this plant, when you want to grow plants. And there is an ecosystem thing that is way more complex than everybody fights everybody, okay? The everybody fights everybody, which ended up in 2 world wars, is not really working for us as humanity. And we don't want to live on the sword forever, especially in the Middle East, when the word living on the sword is so, descriptive of everyday life, which I understand is true for a lot of countries in Africa as well, unfortunately. And I do think that while we absolutely want to make commerce with others, to make, even in the old world, we had marriages were arranged politically. If you take Cleopatra, she was she had lovers that sustain world peace or world discord according to the interest that she saw fit. Okay, so yeah, we don't want people to not have willing consent in their marriage. That's absolutely not where I'm going. But definitely we can acknowledge the importance of interracial marriages, intercultural marriages, um, and merges of worldly trade as well as local nourishment. And definitely we want to be looking a bit deeper as to what is the fate of the common person in the economies that we supposedly look up to as free markets. And no, the common person in Dubai is not wealthy unless they were born to the right family and have the right passport. Same with the common person in Israel, same with the common person in Singapore. And the whole point of an emerging economy is not to redo colonialism, okay, which is basically okay. I'm not gonna whatever. The whole idea that we all need to come from diaspora and then we are going to colonialize basically because that's the next step. I don't think that that is working for us, and I do think that there are other models to lean on. And in that respect, yes, colonialism is oppressive to everybody in the global market, because if you have to sustain a business and that entails enslaving your employees to just survive as a business, that is a very big issue. That is a very big issue. And this is the water that we drink, the food that we eat, the cell phone that I'm broadcasting through, and basically even the air that we breathe, okay, where, we anywhere in those free market economies, you go outside, instead of the clear starry skies and the beautiful organic food and the clean water, what you do get is a lot of pollution, a lot of chemicals sprayed on your farm without your consent, okay? People from the ministries of health getting into your trees that you grow non-commercially and spray things and inject things to the trees without, like, in the middle of the night. They could be eaten by the dogs. Like, this is so weird, and those things are happening in thriving free market economies like the state of Israel. And I'm not even going to mention Europe. Oh, yes, I am going to mention Europe, where you cannot grow crops or cattle because the government threatens you. Okay, so yes, colonialism is an issue. Yes, colonialism, absolutely, we don't want to see ourselves as the perpetual victim of the situation or this helpless person. I do think that the point of intervention is looking at those cultures that are biodiverse, that the point of intervention is looking at those places where equity in dividends is being given without giving up your creative desires as a founder, and with working together. And I can give a good example. For example, the story that the person who made this big, huge, very beautiful resort in Ghana, and he and his wife made it in 2 years, and then he found out that he used to live in that land. He didn't even know. And he said that there are other people who made such resorts in Ghana as well, and if his hotel is full, then he sends to their hotel and vice versa, and they get a good deal. And this is good business. When I was traveling with one of my parents to Europe, and we wanted to come back to Israel, and it was winter, and we got almost stuck in Greece because we wanted to sail. Okay, we couldn't go on a flight, we wanted to sail. And there were two companies. There was Al Aluf, and then there was Al Aluf and Mano. I think it was Al Aluf and Mano. And they were sitting in Greece. And we went to one of them, and then they were full. So they said, please, we are full, but kindly if you can go to the other company. And they called the other person from this other company to make sure maybe they have a place for us on a ferry that we can go back to Israel, and then we did. And so this way the business worked together. I think this is beautiful, and I think this is something we can definitely keep. And the understanding that we get from free market economy, that is, if you have a line of hotels, all of them will be full, unless someplace, you really need to look at other things that happen, but very much likely for all of them to be full. If you have a couple of hotels, if you have one hotel, it's very unlikely that anybody would hear about them. And if people, unless it's like marketed as a luxury escape island to the high society of whatnot, and then you can get Epstein's living there. So other than that, you do understand that competition is good for business and abundance is good for business. This is something we can actually take from free markets, something to not be afraid for the next business to open up and to work together and to kind of merge forces and not be afraid or intimidated by another player in your field. I think this is beautiful, and this is definitely something that I'd like to see adopted in any economy. Yet, before we say, oh, look what beautiful in Singapore, oh, look, I can leave my Ferrari opened in Dubai with the laptop and the doggy, and nobody will come with the laptop and the lion, okay? Or the tiger, the weird stuff are going in the air, and nobody would steal anything. We also need to be aware of those things that we don't see, and that literally means that when you envision that thriving economy, you envision yourself leaving your Ferrari. You're not envisioning yourself closed in a place where you can't go out and your passport is taken away from you so that they can leave their Ferrari out. Okay? And so that is something that I'd really want to raise awareness to. And not without saying, what can we do? What can we do is equity-based business models. It's remembering that competition is good for business, for all businesses. That we can absolutely work together. Is remember the notion of biodiversity, okay? We don't have to stay in our lane. Why? I know this because I'm coming from a nation of people who don't stay in their lane. In fact, the only pitfall is that people get disappeared and die, or I don't know, in some weird trek they made in South America or something like that, or India or whatnot. That's more the pitfall for the place where I'm coming from. So if your lane is not to stay in your lane, then you understand that other countries and other cultures have a lot to teach you, which is good, but you also peek and probe because you also understand that the grass sometimes is only greener if it is an image, okay, of something. And an image of prosperity is not the true story of prosperity. What I would want for these people that ask him, that they say, okay, what is my point of interference? What is my point? I don't want to blame the world, and I don't want to blame anyone. I want to grow something here. Is what I would want them for these people to be informed. And first of all, I'm also one of these people, and for us to really start comprising our vision, being informed of what went rugged in those places, that we can over-idealizing, believing that we and our employees are going to be the one with the Ferrari, and then, ending up having to enslave people in various rates, and sometimes extreme rates, to sustain our entrepreneurial business that was maybe 20, 30 years ago. And it is not a bad thing to look 7 generations ahead in as much as we can. So, yeah, this is what I have to say about this. It's unusual to the types of videos that I'm making. If I try to delineate this, well, I'm in a 4th house perfection. My ruler is in the 2nd house of income. Rahu has just entered my 2nd house of income, which is in Aries. So I have Mercury in Aries, and so I have Mars, and so my 4th, 7th, the Mercury houses, as well as the 9th abroad and 2nd income, because my Mars that rules this Mercury is in the Scorpio in the 9th. They're all being massively activated. And I have Aries next to my Mercury, and Aries is the card of enlightenment of Aries is Discordia, which basically means that I'm going to pay attention to all these things that you didn't see, when you're joining the party of the free market and so on and so forth. I'm like, hey, wait, if you're doing that, 20 years from now, you are Dubai, but this might not be what you want to do. And here is something that we can think of, that we can work on, that we can grow, and that we need to be aware of. Another thing that gets into this whole story is the understanding that a lot of what we see as climate change is, in Hebrew we call it mechasut. But there are basically places in the world where people will go around literally with a ship and ignite fire across the fields, so to create a fire and to destroy the place, and then they say this is climate change. And sometimes it could be governments not wanting to address this issue, which is organized crime. Is happening also in Israel. And sometimes, as any organized something, they have to work with organizations. So they do work with the police, with the government, and sometimes that is induced. If we consider this conspiracy theory and we ignore that, then we are basically not paying attention to what is happening in those free markets. And as we are opening ourselves to the world and to listening to others, it's also important for us to hear the various voices that fact checkers, algorithms might not always put up, and so they might not be as accessible. And that is important for me to do what I can do to reason with people, because I can easily see how if I would be growing, I don't know, in Ghana, then the minute I would get to go to conferences and to learn, then I would say, okay, I don't want to stay in this story of we are still having to liberate ourselves from colonialism when we have supposedly a free autonomy for so and so years. I want to see what are they doing right, what is working right in their economy, and if I would go and I would be a student in academia or I would be a business owner in Britain, then of course my worldview would be different. I would see what is possible way more, but I would also not see where is the blind spot that as I'm doing something could creep up and basically threaten the vision, the essence of what I came here to do. And that is my contribution to the discourse. I do think that the power of people doing something good is important, and I do think that we should never underestimate the power of colonialism and the damages that it made for the economies. And we don't want to place all of our power in the hands of the story of what happened to us, but we also don't want to completely go Pollyanna and forget the importance of the global market stresses, and they do stem from colonialism. Colonialism was only there because people needed more resources to exploit so that they can survive. Okay? The most descriptive of this, which was written in words by a world leader, is basically a book that was banned for reading for quite understandable, supposedly, reasons, and that was Mein Kampf. Okay, Mein Kampf was not an invention. It was a conglomerate of ideas that affected young Adolf Hitler, and those ideas are black, are white, are Jewish, are Christian, are atheist, are British, are Russian, are American. Okay, this was not a person that you could not have a conversation with, but those were the teachings of the time. And those teachings were that we want everybody to gather from diaspora to one land And then life will be on the sword because we will keep colonializing and we will keep. Okay, and there is a very important biblical saying that says "Evet ki imloch," which means a slave. What this describes what happened when a slave becomes a king, and this is, it doesn't matter if what happened. White people, they were enslaved to black people. Okay, what happened when white people were rising? They were enslaving others, and so what we want to be cautious of is this phenomena where the slave becomes a king. Is that also in feminist struggles or feminist agenda, we want to be cautious of that, because the point is not to pimp them like they pimped us, sozusagen. The point is to really create something different, something that is a place that is joyous to live in, a place that is not afraid of being inclusive, without giving up the autonomy, the human rights, and what makes us grow and sustain. So I don't think that the notion of that is very clearly described in Mein Kampf. I don't think that this is what we want the world to go by. It is still going by that. If we look at those economies that run by these ideologies still in 2023, as we want to be like them, we are missing a very big point from the discourse. And again, that would only bring us to a place that now we are as powerful as Britain, but we're still doing this. Like, we're still not gonna be happy crossing over. Our ancestors are still not gonna be all that proud of us for doing that, probably. So yeah, this is my point, and I started this with the Saturn, and I end this with still a Jupiter hour, so a bit better hour. And Jupiter and the midheaven is right on Antares. So even though, it's a good time to publish that. And again, I'm always willing to be educated. So if you have information that counters what I said, that could change the way that I think, or information that furthers my arguments, that gives more information, then please feel free to share. To do video responses, to share in the comments below. I'm not a person that cannot be taught. I'm not a person who's not willing to be educated. I'm not a person that cannot see points. If you give me more data and you give me more stories, it can change my mind, absolutely, and I'm willing to grow. That's my humble contribution to this topic.